Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret Higa, and I'm the Executive Director of HAIDA, the Hawaii branch of the International Dyslexia Association. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this panel presentation, Advocacy and Your Child with Learning Differences. I'd like to give a special thanks to HAIDA's Public Awareness Committee, chaired by Jennifer Leo-Ikidrino, for putting together this presentation, and also to our awesome panelists for giving so much of their time to share their experiences with advocacy with you all. Before I formally introduce our panel, I'd also like to take a moment to thank all our members, all our donors and sponsors for their support in bringing events like this free panel presentation to you. Your support allows HAIDA to continue advancing our mission throughout the state, which is to increase awareness of dyslexia in our community, provide support for individuals with dyslexia, their families and educators, promote teacher training, and improve literacy for struggling readers. Some additional logistics that I'd like to point out. Your audio and video has been turned off, and we kindly ask that everyone keep their audio and video off throughout the presentation so that we may provide a clear experience for everyone. You are more than welcome to put questions or comments in the chat. Myself and a HAIDA volunteer, Christy, will monitor the chat, and the panelists will periodically respond throughout tonight's presentation. Please know that because our time is limited, we might not get to every question, but we will address them in a follow-up email after the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Tonight, we're fortunate to have 3 parents and a school educator ready to share their personal experiences and expertise about how you can help your child with learning differences as they navigate the highs and lows in school and life. We're thrilled to have all our panelists with you. And again, thank you so much for your willingness to share your wisdom with us all. Our first panelist is Kathy Ferguson. Kathy is a professor at UH Manoa. She's an author of a resource guide about dyslexia for people in Hawaii, a certified Orton Gillingham private tutor. And Kathy is a former HAIDA board member and continues as a volunteer on HAIDA's Public Awareness Committee. Thank you so much for joining us, Kathy. And here is the link to get the PDF of the resource guide about dyslexia. That's at the HAIDA website. We also have Tisha Lang Narimatsu. Tisha is the mother of 3 children with learning differences. She's a parent consultant at a new nonprofit, Napua Moa Mahi, and also an academic support teacher at Ainahaina Elementary School. Thank you, Tisha. We appreciate having you with us. Jennifer Leo-Ikidrino, as I mentioned, is the chair of HAIDA's Public Awareness Committee. She's the mother of 2 children, one with learning differences, and also a parent advocate. Thank you, Jennifer, for all your work. And our moderator, Sandy Tadaki, is a longtime HAIDA volunteer who's helped us with many HAIDA events over the years. She's an assistant head of school and the director of admissions at Assets School. Thank you, Sandy, for always so willingly giving of your time to help HAIDA. So I'm going to ask the first question, and then it will go to Tisha. I'm sorry, excuse me, to Sandy to continue. So our first question is, at what age or grade did you understand and internalize or accept that your child has a learning difference? And what were some of the signs that caused you to be concerned? So Tisha, would you get us started, please?
Margaret, it's nice to be here tonight. So I actually have 3 children with learning differences, and they're now in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. We first got their diagnosis back in second grade for my older ones, and then in kindergarten for my youngest one. I actually just realized this year that I too probably have a learning difference of dyslexia when I went through the Orton Gillingham training. I accepted it quickly, right away, that my children have the learning differences, because for my oldest, we had been dealing with behavioral differences and social differences from early on. And so it didn't come as that much of a surprise. But though I accepted it, the guilt and the longing and the grieving for the child that I had expected, that I thought I had, lasted for quite a bit longer. So some of the signs that caused us to be concerned, as I said, that since he was 2, he had been having some behavior challenges and some sensory issues and social issues at school. And so when I was reading to him one night and he came to me and he told me that he was the worst reader in the whole class, I was thinking, oh my gosh, we need to get him tested because he's already struggling so much as it is. And so that's when we got him tested. My daughter, on the other hand, she didn't have any behavioral issues. She was just so well behaved and just such a joy. But the one thing that I did notice was that in about first grade, she started not wanting to go to school and refusing to go to school. Every morning it became a struggle. She'd just run away and hide. And that went on for quite some time. What I didn't know at the time was that her teacher was making her go up to the board regularly to do math problems. And it was causing her a lot of anxiety. And so that's why she didn't want to go to school. One day, as we were working together in second grade and we were trying to read a Bob book, I realized that she couldn't read the book and that she was struggling. And she ended up really frustrated and ran away as well. So it was at that point that I realized that we needed to get her tested. My third child, the one that taught me the most about parenting, had been struggling with behavioral issues since very young. And so I just figured, since her siblings have learning differences, that she too would be touched with a learning difference. And that was certainly the case.
Thank you, Tisha.
You, Jennifer, at what point did you see in your student?
For my daughter, all along, even from the time she was in Tiny Tots, I noticed other kids singing the ABC song and her just kind of veering away from all of that and wondering why. And then she was completely ambidextrous in preschool, and she'd hold pencils in both hands and do mirror images of things, but still wasn't trying to write letters or anything, and continued on into kindergarten where kids are starting to read and spell and just became more challenging. However, we heard the same thing that so many people hear. They all catch up at their own time. She'll get there. Don't worry about it. And I guess a part of me didn't want to worry about it, even though I knew something really wasn't right. And it just became more and more obvious. We started in second grade taking her to an occupational therapist to work with some of the motor coordination and sequencing and fine motor and kind of that brain crossover that we were seeing. But I had a really hard time coming to terms with her having a label. And so we even got the OG tutor, but before third grade, she had a new tutor, and I talked to some other people and they said, you really need to get an assessment to look at where exactly she needs help. So it was a big process for me because I had been labeled as a child and internalized it to mean I was stupid, and I did not want her to go through that. So we did go through the assessment, and it was very important to me that she understand it as a difference and not a disability. And for a long time, I worked with everyone who worked with her to not use the word disability so that she could start to accept it as her difference. So it was really in third grade that we went through the grieving process, as Tisha said, and started to embrace the journey that we would all be on together.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing. I imagine that many parents have traveled that same path as you. So now you're with children who are in elementary school and they're struggling and their skill levels are not on par with that of their classmates. So what this means is that you as moms have to go in and advocate or support your child. What strategies did you use in that process? What system of support did you create so that your children could find success in school and out? Kathy?
Well, it had to be created from ground zero. There was none. And so I would say that, gosh, there was a lot of questions in that question, Sandy. Would you mind saying it again?
Okay, well, let's just start with this. What tactic did you use when you went into the classroom to let the teacher know my children need something different because what you're doing is too hard?
I would say it was when we moved my older son, when we moved him to a little, very sweet little private school in Kailua. If I was ever going to run a school, I would run it that way. It's called Seagull. It was lovely. It's not there anymore. And his teachers there were much more attentive and understood. And one of them said, he may be dyslexic, you should have him tested. So we were really lucky that we had her. And we got him tested, and he was like off the charts dyslexic. And so I didn't have to fight that, because then we put him in assets, and he, you don't have to fight at assets. So, and then we started Ari at assets because, okay, I know what we need to do here. I've watched parents fight it though. It's like a full-time job to persuade the school and over educate the next teacher and the next teacher and the next teacher. Wears you down.
Yeah. Thank you. How about you, Tisha? What did you have to do to find ways for your children to be successful in school, knowing that they're struggling with literacy?
So the first thing that I did, and I think it's, I was fortunate that I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, but I really treated it like this was my profession, right? This is my job. So like I would do with my marketing profession, I would create a product for it. And so the first thing I did was just learn everything that I could about learning differences, because it was totally new to me. And it was way back when, so there wasn't that many resources online. There were books, right? I talked to a ton of people. I talked to folks at HIDA, at LDAH, talked to a lot of providers. I talked to you, Sandy, probably at some point. And some other amazing folks that are actually on the Zoom call. And then the next step was I created my plan, because you got to figure out what's wrong, right, in order to create the treatment. So the testing was really important. Then setting up all the tutoring and setting up all the provider services, which came next. So I was at a school at the time that wasn't as accommodating for children with learning differences. And so I took all that data and I shared it with the teachers to try to get the accommodations. And we worked really hard on that. But eventually I found my way to this wonderful school in East Honolulu, Holy Nativity. And they're very accommodating for children with learning differences. And it made a big difference in the lives of my kiddos and myself, because I was a very anxious parent, and you're going through a lot. And then to have to work with teachers who don't understand or just won't help you out, it's really hard and it's very stressful. So I'm so grateful that we were able to find some schools that worked well for my children with some amazing, amazing people.
Can I just ask, what kind of accommodations did you advocate for?
Well, one of the things that I thought that needed to be done is because my children needed the Orton-Gillingham method of teaching is that I needed to be able to have my children pulled out of class so that they could do the tutoring, right? Rather than do it after school, because children are so tired after school. And so I wanted this to be during the school day, but it wasn't something that was commonplace at the time at the previous school. So I was just really happy when it was a lot easier when I went to the next school.
Wow.
And then of course, my son found his way to acids, which that was wonderful as well.
Jennifer, how about you? What strategies did you use to?
So similar story to Tisha. Once I embraced it, learned everything I could, took every workshop HIDA offered, took additional classes, talked to people, got support, and then started to build a team around my daughter, both inside and outside of school, and really took it as a team approach and really offered it to the school as a team, where we called it team with, her name. And that was the learning specialists, the teachers, her tutors, her occupational therapist at the time. And it kind of, I felt, worked the best, that I was kind of the gatekeeper of the outside support system, and the learning specialist was the gatekeeper of the inside support system. Even though I had to work directly with the teachers, but sometimes they could hear things better from the learning specialist, where I wasn't always trying to override something in the classroom. However, it's been like a full-time job and continues to be. I am that parent, Kathy, that has continued to work hard to keep her out where she is, but she's thriving doing that. And so, it's worth it. She's in leadership roles now in 6th grade, and she's really starting to advocate for herself. And we've had a lot of support. We're at Mid-Pac and we've had a lot of support. They don't always love me, but they're willing to work with me and, find a way to make it work and continue to tweak things as we go.
Kathy?
Andy, could I interrupt? I just wanted to point out how obvious and how common it is that what happens is that the mom becomes an expert on dyslexia. And if you look at both our HIDA and IDA, and I'm sure LDA too, although I've never looked, these are organizations run by the moms of dyslexic and dysgraphic kids. And the remarkable thing is that they stay after their kids grow up, because they know how many other kids there are who also need that. So it's a really fascinating thing. And it kind of helps me to realize that we are totally not alone here. There's a lot of moms in the world and a few dads doing this work. Helps you because you realize it's never over.
No, it's never over. And it looks different because the environment changes.
Exactly.
The technology changes, but the need to share about who your child is, to talk about their strengths and their interests, in addition to the areas that are challenging. Those are really important conversations. You don't want to lose sight of the strengths and interests above all, while you're also talking about these are the areas that need to be scaffolded and supported, and this is how best to do it. So and look at you, Kathy. Your kids are gone out of the house. You're an empty nester, and here you are sharing your experience and your wisdom. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
And since I'm speaking to you, can you?
Sorry, Sandy, this is Margaret. Before we go to the next one, there is a question. It's actually directed towards Tisha. It says, you're a public school support teacher. How should we go about asking for help in public school? And there's a little bit more to that question, but I think the person who wrote it, Mari, will have to address the other parts perhaps later. So Tisha, do you want to take that? Tisha, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, so
Thanks.
the question is, how should I go about asking for help in public school?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be speaking as a parent here. This is what I would do, is I would start with the teacher, because I think that relationship with the teacher is so crucial, and start in that area and see what kind of support you can get from the teacher, what kinds of things are offered at the school. Another conversation that you can have is with the administrator. But if you're looking for more advice on special education and how to go along with that process, then I think that LDAH is a really great resource for that. And they teach parents how to navigate the special education system.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tisha, because the follow-up was, what would be an effective way to discuss in IEP meetings to request services and evaluations? And I echo that, LDAH or ldahawaii.org. And I'll put that in the chat. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's a whole different, anyway, okay, moving on. We're talking about advocacy, right? So Kathy, can you share one area in which one of your boys, you can describe the progression of you being the primary advocate and then slowly weaning off as your boys started to cultivate the language and the courage to be able to advocate for themselves? And at what point did you feel that you could just let them fly free? You have to unmute yourself, Kathy. We all do this.
Sorry, I knew I would forget that. As we said earlier, this process of struggling with change and revisiting the problem, it's going to happen the whole life of your kid. Sorry to tell you. And so when my oldest child was in his 20s, he was given a job at this organization he worked at that was kind of the opposite of what he needed. It was very, it required a lot of decisions very fast over and over. It was hectic, and he needed, and it was very linear, and he's never been good at anything linear. He's a big picture person, it's all depth, and here he's got to get things in a row. It's like the bane of the dyslexic and dysgraphic child. And so it was just like being back in grade school and not being able to read. And so, but he's got adult resources now. He's in his 20s. And so basically I just reminded him that the basic principle behind OG and behind teaching kids who have this kind of reading struggles is break it down to its smallest component parts, identify each part, practice each part, and then build it back up one step at a time. And that's what you do in OG when you teach language, and that's what you can do to solve problems. And so we did that, and he kind of did most of it, but I did it with him like he didn't know what I meant at first. And so I said, what do you have to do first? Well, what do you have to do next? What do you have to do next? Just describe it, break it down to 5, I don't remember how many, 5, 6 components. Okay, now what's that require? Okay, now what's that require? Okay, now put those two together. Just like sounding out a word. And it worked, and he was fine. He hated the job, but he did it.
In his work, just out of curiosity, so in his workplace, did he specifically have to advocate for any particular adaptation or accommodation in terms of how the work was delivered to him or how he responded to the work that was given to him?
I don't think so. I think that it was essentially assembly line work, only it was in a warehouse that produced little gaming pieces. So at least they were fun to look at. But it was very cut and dried. And there was one thing to learn, and you learned it and you did it over and over and over.
I see.
So no, I don't think so. I think my younger child, where he was in college and he had to go and ask for the accommodations that he needed, then he had to know more of what you're talking about, I think.
And was he able to capitalize off of all of
Yeah, he knew what to say. He had learned You know, he needed extra time and a quiet place. That was the most important thing for him. And UW was great, University of Washington in Seattle, and he never had any problem. He never had a professor say, "I don't believe you." You know, they've educated their faculty there, at least the ones he had. So it went well.
Okay. Tisha, can you cite maybe one area where you were the lead point person and then gradually eased off and then your child took over?
Okay, I think I'm going to start with my oldest. So now they're in middle school and high school, and all my children are now in public school. So eventually we were able to transition them successfully so that they could succeed in public school, and they're doing pretty well. So for them, I make sure to include them in the school team meetings. Right. And so I just had my daughter in the last meeting as we were trying to get a 504 to get her some official accommodations. And so we worked together on her story because she's super nervous, right? I mean, this is like a big deal being in a Zoom room with like 8 teachers and administrators. So she wrote up her whole story and she read it and she was shaking and, you know, trying to explain why she needed accommodations. But it was very successful. You know, it was such a confidence boost to her, and it's going to help her to advocate for years to come. But what I do for them is I guide them to send emails at the beginning of the school year to the teachers to kind of explain their situation, you know, share any data. If they run into issues, then I try to guide them for that so that they're, you know, writing the kind of proper emails that are polite. When they're in elementary school, though, I take the lead, right? Because I just don't want to put that kind of pressure on my children. And so I usually will meet with the teacher at the beginning of the school year, and we can have a similar conversation to explain like their background and share any data. And then just what I want to do is just partner with the teachers, because the teacher and family relationship is just so crucial to having your child succeed in school. So we set that up in advance and any accommodations that they may need. I have gone through the, you know, in the public school, we have had to go through, like I said, the 504 process for the accommodations. But that's not something like for my younger child that I include her in, but I talk to her about it. So every step of the way, like when she's doing the testing or when I'm going to a meeting or talking about what kind of accommodations she needs, we'll talk about it. And then I'm like speaking on her behalf. So I'm including her in the process. And then she knows like next year, man, she's going to be at that meeting. But most importantly, I think for our children, it's just learning how to advocate for themselves, is asking for help. And for some children, it's really difficult. Like the kids that have anxiety, my youngest daughter, she didn't speak to adults for years. And she's like 11 and she's finally coming out of her shell. So something that we did was, I just remember this clearly, we'd go to McDonald's and she loved Happy Meals. I would hardly buy them because they're not that healthy, but I mean, she loved them. So we would go to McDonald's and I just said, well, if you want that Happy Meal, you're going to need to order. And so there was a long pause and there was a line behind us, but I just shut up, right? And finally she decided that she's going to order. So it took like weeks and weeks of going to McDonald's and ordering, but that's just kind of how we got the start and how she could like find her voice. And so eventually she felt comfortable asking for help, which is really essential that your kids ask for that help.
What a great story. Just on the trajectory that they're on, Tisha, right now, do you foresee by the time that they're seniors and then on their way to college that they'll be the ones at the front saying,
well, that's the plan, right? I'm trying to launch them to be a successful adult. So I'm doing, it's a lot of coaching, but I mean, I'm not going to be around. So they got to take care of this stuff for themselves once they get to that point.
Awesome. How about you, Jennifer? How have you managed this journey?
As we started off, I definitely took the lead and always spoke to her about what I was doing, but I didn't include her in the meetings at first because she was just so overwhelmed, didn't understand the language. And that was in 3rd grade, but by 4th grade, I really started working with her, and even in 3rd grade, on owning her dyslexia and not keeping it as a secret, because I really feel that's a key. In order to advocate for yourself, you got to own this part of yourself, because how can you tell anybody when you're trying to hide it? And so by 4th grade, she let her class know she was dyslexic. By 5th grade, she started getting bullied. She asked the teacher if she could do a presentation to her class on what dyslexia was. And so she asked a high school student that she had met that was dyslexic to join her, and if one of the other dyslexic students would want to be part of it. And they did a presentation for both 5th grade classes on what dyslexia was, and it was very healing for her. And it opened up for a lot of kids that felt different, that they weren't the only ones different. And so I've worked a lot with her on advocating for herself to also advocate for other people, and that if she can stand up, it will change other children's lives too. And that really hits a place for her. She wants to help other people. And so now it's at a point in 6th grade where she'll either email a teacher with my support, or I'll email and she's standing there talking the process through together. But she's really getting to that place of asking for help. Just like Tisha said, like, that's my goal for her, is to know when she needs help and to be able to say, I can't do this like this. How can we do it different? And we're starting to see that. So I didn't think that we'd ever get there. And for all those parents that are just starting this journey, you really see the changes. But I think it's key that they own this part of themselves.
That is so powerful. I think that your children can do what they do to advocate for themselves because they know you have their back, that you believe in them and you completely accept them, and that you're going to do whatever needs to be done to enable their success. They know that. And, you know, in terms of students with learning differences, they tumble a lot, right? Resilience is a really critical trait that they need to cultivate, because otherwise it's just, you can just crumple and fold and you just stymie your own progress. And so, you know, advocacy is a really important part of resilience. But that self-acceptance piece, Jennifer, that is so huge, because sometimes students can say, yeah, you know, I have dyslexia, I need extended time. And they'll say it in certain circumstances, but not necessarily generalize that. And in other areas, they may want to be like everybody else and not want to embrace their learning profile. And so to hear that acceptance piece in somebody so young is just inspirational. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so Kathy, how did you get your boys to buy in and be motivated to be self-advocates? How, you know, how did they get to the point where they recognize I need to do this and not be reliant on you? And then are they more willing to advocate with some than with others? And you're muted again.
Thank you. They have to want it. That's the bottom line, really, is, you know, my kids are adults and there's just no way that anything will happen that they don't want. So, of course, looking back, what you have to do when they're younger is get them to the point where they can want that. They have the capacity to say, this is what I want. Okay, I'm going to do what it takes to get to it. I think it's wonderful that never occurred to me, but I think it's a great idea to show the child how they're helping other children. That's brilliant, you know, because who doesn't want to do that? You know, our kids would like to help each other.
Absolutely. Tisha, with your children, the positive response that they're getting from the educators that they're advocating with, do you feel that in and of itself is giving them the confidence and motivation to continue with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine that if my daughter, being that this was her first meeting, and if she got shot down by all of the, several of the adults, it would have crushed her. So I was very grateful to the team and the administration for making it a positive experience for her. And we are also really fortunate. I mean, I can't tell you like how many amazing teachers and administrators that we've come across through all these years. I feel so blessed. But luckily on that team, there was a dyslexic teacher. So she, with anxiety, so she totally knew where Lauren was coming from, and she advocated on her behalf as well.
Have you ever encountered an educator who said no?
Sure. I
With
have.
your children present,
With my children present.
while you're guiding them in this advocacy
Mhm.
process, have you ever encountered a teacher who, or an educator who gently said, yeah, I don't think I can do that?
Well, now that they're in public school, they have the 504s. And so it's more of, it's accommodations that it's all listed out. And so it's not really, I don't think it's really as much as the teacher can say, oh no, I'm not going to do it, because it's part of it. And so if they aren't going to do it, then I would have my son, share that this is accommodations, because a lot of times it's just that they don't know or they haven't seen the document. And so it's just a reminder.
Okay, so it's your experience that if a teacher is not aware that there is a 504 plan, once you bring it to their attention, or your child brings it to their attention,
Mhm.
that they are willing to provide whatever is required.
Yeah, that's been my experience. So like I said, I mean, we haven't had it hasn't been like 100% positive experiences, but for the most part, we've had really good experiences as we've gone along this journey.
That's wonderful. How about you, Jennifer?
For my daughter, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I've had to go, I think what works best to get her buy-in is to kind of say, what will it look like if you use these accommodations and advocate for yourself? Like, what will the end product be? And what will the end product be if we don't use them? So if it's a math test and having extra time and needing to advocate and remind a teacher, remember, I get extra time. That's scary every time if it's not set up, and hopefully it is, but sometimes teachers forget. But now that she's gotten to the point of really seeing that it doesn't work when she's in the classroom and there's distractions and there's noise and she can't stay on task, and she's trying so hard to use her text to speech to have it read her math test to her, that she knows now, I need that quiet space, I need that extra time. And so she really recognizes the value of advocating and using an accommodation, and the same with speech to text or text to speech in the classroom in general. She's going to be sitting there staring at the wall most of the time because she can't read the document that's in front of her. And so at first she just didn't want to do the work, but now she wants to succeed, and so it's worth doing it. But if there is the teacher that she uses her voice with and they don't really hear her, it takes a lot of work for her to try again. She's less likely to reach out to that teacher versus the teacher that, open arms, gets what she's saying. And as a parent, it's so easy to send the email that says, this still isn't working, we're not doing that. And we forget to send the email that says, thank you for hearing her. Thank you for acknowledging that she did this step, because they had to take that extra step too. And it's so important for her to see that the teacher is acknowledging the steps she's taking.
A lovely point. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Kathy had alluded to the difficulties encountered whenever there's a transition that comes up. So what was the most challenging aspects of transitioning from one grade to the next, or from, for example, like elementary to middle school to high school, and then for your boys, high school to college? How did you and your kids manage or overcome these challenges?
Well, I think that one of the worst parts is the feeling, oh no, not again. We dealt with this time and again before. Haven't we got this one? It's the same thing in a different form, and you just don't. You feel a sense of dread because maybe this time you won't be successful. There's always fear that you'll fail. But gosh, patience. The on the other hand is that think your child is having to once again deal with the transition that's throwing up difficult and hard to analyze tasks that he has to do. But on the other hand, he's 25 now instead of 7. And so he has a lot of adult resources, plus everything he's learned about advocating for himself. And I think in addition to knowing what to say, all the things the others have mentioned, being willing to say it, is patience. That you have to keep at this, just learning patience. And also, sometimes you have to go around problems. Sometimes there's a teacher that you just need to not have. And in college, that is easier. So they had to learn that too, is that there's only, sometimes they can't fix the situation, but there's another way to fix it. And that's by going outside and it's essentially going to the dean and saying, this is my problem and this is what I need. And that has worked. And the kid did it, I didn't do it.
Tisha, how about you? Transitioning from one grade or one teacher to the next, how was it?
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations. That is fabulous, Kathy. That is amazing. I hope that my kids do that someday if they need to. So for my children, the most difficult transitions were when they transitioned from private school into public school, because they were going from a really small classroom environment to schools that were like 8 to 10 times their size. And so that was really something. But what we did was we prepared them in advance. And we made sure we went through that whole evaluation process, going through getting the supports and the accommodations put in place beforehand, introduced them to friendly faces at the school. And like if the school is willing to take them on a tour, we did some tours in advance just so they could feel comfortable, right? I think, Sandy, you did that for my son when we went to Assets in advance, before school starts, before all the kids are there. So that was something that was really helpful. We had a lot of talks, but again, like I feel that the school partnership was so essential to their success. And then just having these wonderful, caring folks, and some of them like going beyond and above, like that I never expected to help my children, was just amazing, and really contributed to their success.
Thank you. Jennifer, transitioning from one to something else?
Yeah, like Kathy said, it's here we are again and having to do the whole education again. But personally, I kind of now look at it as a life mission of educating beyond my own daughter, and hopefully one day getting closer to universal learning for all kids. But wouldn't that be nice? But honestly, like her transitioning into middle school, I started the February before working with the dean and looking at, is this really going to work? Every year we have to look at, can we stay at this school? Can we make this work? She is severely dyslexic. And just really looking at what can we do? Like Tisha said, having time during school for tutoring, can we make that fit in so she's not adding that to the end of the day? And I'm already looking at next year. And again, like Kathy said, not all teachers are equal, and nothing wrong with that. Some people have a better understanding of learning differences. Their teaching style fits better. And so I've already brought that up to the school of, are there going to be teachers, or just from my own knowing of my son being older, I think this would be a better fit for someone who can work with her. But I've been so lucky with the dean who has listened to all my suggestions and how can we work with it. It's a lot of work every year. And yes, she builds up a lot of anxiety right before school. Will they get me? Will the kids get me? And just so important that the teachers get to know who they are personally, that they really understand their learning profile, because then they want to help. You know, they fall in love with the kid and they really want to help them.
So Jennifer, is it your experience then that if a teacher doesn't have a real clear sense of what a learning difference is, that it's a bona fide challenge? Once you educate the teacher, you find that they're responsive to requests for support?
Not just that easily. I mean, it's usually because if they really don't get it from the beginning, it is usually a process all year. So, I mean, we had a class this year and I had explained like note taking will just be a nightmare. And yet she was asked to take notes in a class she really normally wouldn't take notes for. And when I saw it, it was torture. This child wrote 1.5 pages of notes that were the words, but there was no way she would ever be able to read it again, let alone that teacher. And the level of exhaustion, plus it was on a video. And by the end, she had no idea what that video was about because she was just trying to take notes. So I went back to the teacher and I said, look at this, look at the pain in this. And I will actually use that piece of paper to teach many other teachers about note taking for dyslexics, because it really showed what happens and how hard they try and the level of exhaustion that goes into it.
Was it to the point where there was no brokering any give on the part of the teacher?
They did in the end. They did in the end, but they just, they think they get it. They think they understand it, but they just understand the tip of the iceberg of what it is. And so for some, it's a constant reminder. Remember, this child does not learn that way. And so those are painful moments for the child because they went through it and then you have to revisit again. And that's where you build up that grit and resilience, because here we are again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tisha, how about you? Have you ever hit a rough patch in working with teachers?
Years ago, yes, I did. And then I think what Kathy had said about sometimes you just don't need to have that teacher is really true. So that's at that point is when we decided to make a change.
I see.
In my children's education.
Okay.
Sandy, if I could interject here, there's a question. How long is an OG tutor needed and what kind of support for your child is needed after that? And if we could direct that to Kathy, since we're starting to run short on time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we OG tutors are told that on average, if we can see a learner 2 to 3 times a week for 2 years, we can catch them up to grade level. But that's an average, it's wildly divergent, sways in multiple directions. So every learner is different. But in my own experience, at the end of 2 years, I'm usually pretty satisfied if they've come regularly, that they are ready to function at their grade level usually.
That's great. Was there more, Margaret, to that question?
I think, and maybe I could take a stab at this, what level of support needed for how long throughout your child's journey, what kind of support needed? And that really, to echo Kathy, I mean, it really depends on the student and what they need. And I think it speaks to what all of you have been speaking about this evening, about kind of scaffolding and working with your child, demonstrating for them how to be an advocate, walking with them through that journey. So I think the type of support depends on the child and the buy-in, because when they reach a certain age, I mean, some of them just want to fly and do it on their own, just naturally, and then maybe come back and seek the parents' help or the teacher's help when maybe they hit a roadblock. So there's a lot of variability, I would say, in that.
Yeah.
And can I
Oh,
also
go ahead,
add?
Kathy.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I
Go
would
ahead.
add, I agree with that totally, that, sorry, I lost my train of thought, that the process, you have to be patient. It's going to vary from person to person, and it really pays off to try to find institutions that are from the get-go more positively oriented toward them. And again, that may not be possible in grade school, but by the time you get to college, there's a lot of colleges. And your question has to be, is this the best college for my kid? Not, is this the best college in the abstract? So my older son went to a school that was an excellent school and very good for him, because there were no tests at all, timed or otherwise. Everybody wrote papers and did projects. That's much better for a dyslexic and dysgraphic child than, you know, anything like you never had to copy off the board. You didn't have to read aloud if you didn't want to. It was already a very kind and sort of universal design oriented school. Whereas the younger one went to a much more conventional university, and he needed the intervention of the special ed folks in the proper office, and they were all too willing to do it, and everything went fine. But the older one didn't need that. The whole institution was set up to be very flexible. Whereas the bigger you get in a university, generally, by and large, the less likely that is.
Tisha, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, trying to answer the question about how long and what level of support is needed. I really think, you know, it depends on your children. However, it's like this long-term journey. When I was first starting the journey, I thought, oh, okay, we get him this treatment, we get him that treatment, he's cured, right? I didn't realize that it's just like a continuous process. Sometimes new learning differences come up, and then we have to treat that, or they may need special services like occupational therapy, a speech therapist. They may need other kinds of alternative treatments. So there's just, and I would say a lot of behavioral treatment and a lot of parent coaching. So it's just a step-by-step process. It's been an ongoing journey. I'm continuing to learn, but you just got to take it one day at a time.
I'm not a parent, but if I could just interject, Jennifer spoke really eloquently about the use of assistive technology in her daughter's success, the text-to-speech, speech-to-text, that all of that kind of stuff. And any student who's a struggling reader really still needs to have access to text, content of text, vocabulary, and content, because that's where so much learning occurs. And that's why assistive technology is so critical, because if you're going to wait until a student cultivates the skills to be able to access that independently, you're depriving this child of tremendous opportunity. And it just makes school so much harder. It really does. So yeah, tutoring is great. And yeah, what it looks for everybody differs. But while the tutoring is occurring, please circumvent that difficulty and do what you need to do to give that student access to vocabulary and content, because that is so, you don't want to further hinder your child's learning. Writing may already be hard enough. You don't want to stifle the language base and the content knowledge in addition to that. That would be really difficult. Does anybody want to speak to the types of accommodations you advocate for?
Sorry, Sandy, can I just jump in again?
Yep, go ahead.
Because we have 3 minutes left. We just want to be respectful.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. This is an awesome conversation. We just want to be respectful of everyone's time. So
Yes.
what I want to say is we do have some questions coming in, And Kathy Ferguson, we talked before starting, and she's kindly agreed to, address questions, and we'll email people after anything that we weren't able to get to. So I just want to assure people, we do see your questions and we will send an email after this evening. And then if I could suggest, because we just have a few minutes left, that maybe we ask each panelist to speak to kind of the message they'd want to share with everyone, given the current educational landscape because of the pandemic.
I defer to the parents.
Yeah. So
I'll jump in. So the word patience and the word acceptance comes to mind, and it's a really challenging time, and we've seen good and bad in both the virtual and in the in-person learning through all this. With the virtual learning, the whole chat box has been really challenging, but teaching teachers that a child needs to come off mute and use their voice has been really important. And at the same time, if our daughter had a challenge, she could run to the next room and ask one of us, how do I spell this? How can you help me read this? She's back in in-person school and feels much more successful that way, but try using speech to text with a mask on has become a whole new challenge. And so they've had to find a little private room that she has to walk through another classroom to get to. So this has added complications for everybody, but for a child with learning differences, it has exacerbated it even beyond that. And we've really backed off some of the pressure on her this year of extra tutoring. She does a little bit, but we are focusing on her strengths and her joys, because I just think everybody needs more joy right now. So, found virtual dance, virtual voice lessons. She's doing virtual theater at school. And yeah, it's a little scary. We might be sliding a little bit in academics, even though it looks like she's doing pretty well, but we don't have that extra tutoring right now. But I think the joy is, you can add joy if you can see their strengths. And dyslexia is one part of them. It is not all of who they are.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I totally agree with that. And my 2 cents would be, this would be a great time to teach your kid to type. If they don't already do full 10-fingered typing, don't let them do this. That's going to so slow them down. They need full fingered, and I totally recommend one of the basic programs like Mavis Beacon teaches typing. It's a great program. It costs $20 and it's 10 minutes a day. And in a couple of years, your kid will be a really good typist, and it will free them up so much later. And the other thing is, I totally, for educators too, echo Jennifer's point, now is really not the time to make high stress academics a big part of people's lives. Now we should be finding things to do with them that are going to help them through this. We can still go outdoors here. We're really lucky. And there are safe things that you can do that outdoors and indoors with your child, that is just be happy together, do something that you like together. Academic stuff, it's not a race. We'll get back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree there. That I think what's been really important is just trying to chill out, stay more calm, and try to, connect with your family and utilize this time, create some fun activities, connect with others, support others. I think that's really helpful for stress release. Learn to meditate, move around. I love dance, so I've been doing a lot of Zumba. But really find laughter and take care of yourself, because it's really important that parents take care of themselves. So important. And just know that, like, for children with learning difference, it just takes that one adult, that one teacher, parent or grandparent to be that supportive person for that child, and your child will be okay. Your child will be fine because your child has you.
That was so true. Well done. Okay, Margaret, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for sticking around for a couple minutes. I just want to thank our awesome panel. What a great discussion. And Sandy and I were just having a side little conversation. We think part 2 is probably in order because there's a lot more to get to. But as I said, we will be emailing you some additional information. And I just want to, okay, wait, get back here, technical stuff. I just want to share with you about some of the information that we have, that you can also find other resources at our website, and you can also make a donation there so that we can keep having presentations like this, free or low cost for the community. And also for other resources, some of you are members, and we thank you for that, for joining with us in our mission. And for others who may be interested, here's the information. Go to the IDA website, which we are a branch of, and you can become a member there. And then finally, at our website, we have a lot of information. Website, we also have a Facebook page. You do not have to have a Facebook account to access our Facebook page. And then we have a YouTube channel where we post videos, including like this one. After we get the recording all set, we'll put that up there. So thank you all very much for joining us this evening. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, like such great information shared. And stay tuned, there may be a part 2 coming. Have a good evening, everyone, and stay safe.